Welcome to the Otherworlds, where we talk to authors of fantasy, supernatural, and paranormal stories. Let's open the portal and meet our guest.
Hi, my name is Sandra Dan, and I am joined today by Maggie Rapier, and we are going to talk about her debut romantasy novel, Soulgazer. Maggie describes herself as an incurable romantic who loves witchcraft and wordplay and spending time in nature. Uh, Soulgazer is out July 8th, and we're going to chat about it now. Thank you so much for joining me on the Otherworlds.
Thank you for having me. This is such a pleasure already.
I know it's a huge thing having your debut novel come out, and you were able to announce that in January 2024, and now it's almost time for it to come out. How are you feeling as you get closer to the release date?
The best way I've been able to describe it with friends lately has been it feels like you're getting ready for a wedding because you have so many things to keep track of, all the little deadlines along the way, and you're seeing invitations and you're like getting all this buzz. And I just know once I cross that threshold, I'll just be married. I'll just be an author and it'll be great. So I can just make it to the wedding day and it's gonna be great. There's a lot of pressure, but there's a lot of joy in it too. So it just depends on the day. Today is wonderful. Today, the sun's happy, my little wildflowers are blooming, and I'm vibing with book two. So like today's a good day for it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, I was wondering about this. You have many Irish and Gaelic names in the book, and you also went on a research trip to Ireland for book two. So can you share a little bit about how Ireland informed the research, what you were specifically looking at when you went there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the origin of the Ireland inspiration, right, started with this old musical I loved in the early 2000s called The Pirate Queen, which is about Grace O'Malley or Grania O'Malley. She was this Irish pirate who went head to head with Queen Elizabeth, and there's this incredible lore around her and this history around her. And so what started as like that childhood obsession kind of like kept going from there. So when I went into it, or went to Ireland, part of my goal, because I'm not Irish, was to be as respectful as possible in my research because it is a full culture and it's this full language that, England did their best to eradicate. And I, like, whenever I've tried to use it, I've tried to like triple check my sources and go through. I really fell in love with the Shanachie, which is this. It's this history of like Irish storytellers who act almost like storytellers, historians, lawmakers, law keepers. They were like these like oral narrators who were incredible. And that history of storytelling is still present in everyday like Irish language and culture. So one of my it's like my two goals going there was to understand what it was like to walk on those beaches, to see the cliffs, to walk the land and understand like what that felt like in your bones. And the second was to engage with some locals, make some friends, and thankfully I did. So I think one of my favorite experiences, the one that I will like, I've tried to draw into, especially book two, was one night our host at this little B&B brought us to their favorite pub. And the like guy behind the bar was a teenager. He was like an older teen, I think like probably 18 or something. And they just started like swapping stories about a puka down the road who would just like show up one night. And when we talked about going to the Giant's Causeway, like he immediately was recounting like, oh yeah, long ago, blah blah blah, and like just the cadence and the understanding, the way it's just baked into their bones is just like so lovely to hear. Um, and so that's where a lot of that comes from, was it started as that like childhood obsession and then it turned into these like dark pebbled beaches and that idea of legend and storytelling. And that's kind of what kind of brought me to Soul Gazer and the whole Celtic inspiration there.
It seems like that's a big part behind Phelan's character.
Yeah, he's very much storyteller extraordinaire. I always joke now because my partner has gotten me into Dungeons and Dragons. He would be a bard if he was a character at all. If that tells you anything. loves a story. He's larger than life. He really likes to just put on a show.
Well, yeah, that can be very entertaining. It's actually kind of interesting to see how Saoirse deals with trying to parse out those different aspects of Phelan because he is this rather larger than life character at times, and yet there's all of these different layers within him. Did you find it hard to 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 develop him in such a layered way?
Not hard per se. It was a challenge for sure. The bigger challenge was it's all told in Saoirse's point of view. And so anything, so she, even when he's being sincere, I knew she would be questioning it because she knows that he loves nothing more than to put on this show and this persona and create the wolf. And in doing so and in writing her perspective, it was hard for me at times to discern when is he being just himself and when is he trying to get somewhere, like work an angle. So the challenge came in understanding his tics, like his almost his mannerisms sometimes, because he's a very like we were talking about neurospiciness earlier, and I've again like I've kind of figured out I have ADD over writing this book, and I'm pretty sure he has it as well because he's just constantly moving and bouncing and like he's just constantly looking for more stimulation. And the moments when I can tell he's being more himself and he is being more vulnerable or even catching himself off guard by his own feelings is when he kind of goes still and he's just kind of like watchful and he's like, what's going on here? Who is this person? Um, yeah, so I would say that more so than like oh, I forgot what you said already. It's more complex and challenging.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
kind of it was a fun puzzle that I'm like getting to lean into a lot heavier in book two. So that's been really nice.
Yeah, I was quite curious about where book two would go, but I also will not pressure you for any spoilers or anything like that. So,
Thank you.
so no fear. Because it can be challenging to talk about a character, generally speaking, when they have such an interesting arc. And of course, because we're always in Saoirse's perspective, we're also trying to figure out when he's being sincere and when he isn't being sincere. And of course, her judgment is clouded by her own insecurities. In your acknowledgments, you actually said you described Saoirse as the saddest girl who ever lived.
Yeah.
So, what was the appeal to you of writing such a sad character?
Well, I'm a sad girl, or at least I like have spent a lot of my time as one. I think for me, let me think how I want to frame this. A fellow author of mine, Brittany Arena, who wrote A Dance of Lies, and I have been talking a lot lately about trauma, how it has affected our lives, and how it has influenced our characters. And I love a lot of romantasy. I love a lot of fantasy and fiction. There's a really rich, wonderful world out there. But a lot of the heroines, it's a little more rare to see. It can be a little more rare to see softness and struggle and the pain of that trauma versus the, okay, I'm gonna grab a sword and go fight it. And I think both are valid. Like everyone has their own experiences and their own adapters to experiencing my trauma. But with mine in particular, there's a brokenness and a fragility that I lived with for many, many years. Um, like I remember, I think it was during COVID that I like 2020 to 2021 that I probably had or 2019, 2021 that I had the most radical like growth internally. And that was also the time when I realized, oh, I just spent like I've spent the majority of my life hating myself. And I'm not just like, oh, I don't like myself. I don't like this about myself. Like purposefully with the culture around me teaching me to hate myself. Like that was what I was struggling with. And I had to learn just this radical, like unlearning of self-hatred and of so many toxic roots that had like burrowed themselves inside me to understand who I was, what my power was, that it's okay to feel anger and sadness and to express negative emotions and overcome them. And so with writing Saoirse, that really appealed to me, was seeing someone who is just broken inside and how you can work through the breakage, but not just work through it, like start to heal while also understanding those scars are still there and they'll still twinge sometimes, they'll still hurt. And yeah, like she's not a fighter. She's, fight, flight, or fawn or freeze or whatever. She'll freeze and fawn. Like she will kind of pull back. And I think I think the narrative, but like what I also joke about too, is I think the narrative would be radically different if it was just her story. I feel like it would have been incredibly darker. It would be a lot heavier. And that's why I liked the romance. I said the romance as I did because for all of her pain and her trauma and her, saddest battle that ever lived, she needs a trickster to kind of like break her of that. So playing with that trickster martyr complex was like super appealing as well because I needed something to like snap her out of that. And then for her to like weigh him down and then for him to boost her up and just constantly do this little fight thing. Sorry, I'm doing my hands. This is a podcast.
That's okay. I talk with my hands too. So, yeah, it's interesting though because like they do complement each other in an interesting way, but also the other people who ultimately are around her, who are part of Phelan's crew on the unnamed ship.
The
um,
sad ship.
yeah, I was, there's a lot of observation of her, and because there's, I think initially there's, of course, curiosity, but also suspicion given who she is. And her relationship with Brona is particularly interesting. How did you decide that you wanted to have that relationship emphasized in the book and develop that aspect of Sorce's growth?
Yeah. Well, first things first, I really want Saoirse to have a friend. She needs friends. She hasn't had friends for a very long time since her brothers were and she were younger. With Brona in particular, and again, some of this kind of ties in with personal experience. Some of this is, pure fiction. But coming out of a culture or a time period where you are just convinced that this is how the world is, this is how I'm supposed to be, I'm supposed to keep my head down and my mouth closed, all these things. I liked having someone who had experienced none of that and who was just relentlessly like challenging it. So Verna can be kind of harsh sometimes with her critiques, and she is suspicious. She's a navigator on this pirate ship. So she's like, who are you? What is going on? But again, I really, because Saoirse is such a soft character, I really want to surround her with sharp edges and with a little more tension to try to like pop her just to challenge her worldview, but also to help shape her even as she's softening their edges. It's almost how I view it almost as very elemental. So like Phelan is very sun-coated and very fire. Brona's kind of flinty. She's very earthy. And then Saoirse's like a little water baby. And I feel like there's a constant tempering that happens. And then with Brona especially, I wanted to have with Phelan's more of a foil. Brona is more of a yeah, like a minor antagonist turned friend. I really wanted her to help empower Saoirse, but sometimes empowerment does not look like you go, girl. Sometimes empowerment looks like get up, there's egg on your face.
Oh my,
I feel like my sister was really good for that for me because she'd be like, she'd let me feel my feelings. She'd be like, okay, are we done now? Are you done? Let's come on. Come on, you gotta keep living. You gotta keep doing things. And I was like she has videos of me like on the floor crying from 5 years ago, working through some stuff, and she's like, okay, you've had 15 minutes. It's time to go like wash your face. Let's go make dinner. Let's go like you need to eat something.
no, there's something really special about the dynamic, and I have to say, one of the things that I really loved was that there was never like a competition for Phelan's affection. There was never, you didn't introduce, so often there are those elements that are added into a story where, to create tension. And it's never, if anything, it's kind of like, who would want him? Like, you know, the other women around him like see right through him,
Yeah,
and and yet still follow him because he has, because they do see him quite clearly. And there's something about somebody who has the confidence and swagger that he has, even even if half of what he says about himself is crap.
oh yeah, he's ridiculous. But I think playing with that dynamic too, and with the crew's affection for him, I wanted to lean kind of like Hal from Hal's Moving Castle a little bit there with like Hal and Sophie, where he has all these personas, and like to the larger world, he is this like like almost rock star feeling. I won't be able to just be like, that's the Wolf of the Wild. And Saoirse was that person. She was a fangirl. Like she used to like hear stories of him when he was first getting started as like a teenager, and she was a teenager, and starting to kind of fantasize about him. What I liked and what I really wanted to do with the crew as well is that they're perfectly happy and willing to let people believe that narrative, because it allows all of them like freedom of movement, and it allows them to live their lives and be happy, but they're also in close proximity with this man. And they do like fully believe in him because he can do extraordinary things. He promises the moon and he'll get you pretty much there. Even if it's like not quite what you think it will be. So like with them, with Brona, Nessa, with like the crew at large, I want us to understand that like they probably started as a starstruck people as well, and eventually they were like, "Oh, I see you. You're a big goofball, but you are pretty cool. So we'll stick with you."
I mean, you're right though that he does like, he does deliver in his own way on so many different things. And that does kind of create its own, intrigue because, you never really know what's coming around the bend. Like there were points where I don't want to get into spoilers, but there were some points where I was kind of like, well, why are they going here and why are they looking for that? And and then it all connects. And
Mhm. If it makes you feel better, I didn't know at the time either. I was like, "This is a cool scene. What's happening here?" I'm like, "Oh, there it is."
you know what? Sometimes the subconscious is way ahead of the rest of the brain, right? And and it's almost like you live and breathe and sleep with these characters for so long that they are kind of like whispering to you when you're not even, you know, actively thinking about what they're doing.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's what I would say to that because all of a sudden everything comes into focus when you're writing a scene, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
but yeah, I found it really kind of interesting because you never really knew kind of, but also because we are strictly in her perspective, um, you really didn't really know kind of what he was up to sometimes. So that
Mhm.
kind of added to the fun because a lot of people enjoy um, the romanticides that have both characters' points of view. But and I was wondering at first, oh, is this one going to? And then, but as it went on, I was kind of like, I see the benefit of just being anchored with him.
Yeah. And I will say with book two, I do bring in his perspective because now his big secret's out. So like I don't have to worry about hiding it.
Well,
But yeah, that was definitely a deliberate choice in book one, because for a minute there, I thought about bringing his in, and there was just I really wanted to center on her, at least for book one, and her magic and that empathy. And uh, I wanted to keep the lore of him intact as long as possible. Yeah, because I think that, like, again, the storytelling component was just really important there as well.
yeah, no, that makes sense, actually. I mean, I just felt like it added to the layers of mystery in the story because, you are kind of left to parse out like what is his motive, what's he really thinking, what's his real agenda. I mean, you're
Mhm.
thinking, obviously, you start thinking about this with everybody around them, like as they interact with different people and like I will say there was one encounter. I'm not gonna allude too much, but like later on, there was one encounter with Saoirse, and I was just like, "Oh, don't tell, don't." Keep quiet,
Mhm.
don't. And then, oh no. Like I kind of had that reaction of like, oh, I'm not really trusting this moment. Not the way you are. You know?
Mhm.
And then it's kind of interesting to see like whether or not that pans out or not because you don't know like
Yeah.
as you're journeying into this story. And honestly, I will say there's one person who I won't ask you, but there is one person who at the end of the book I was like, what is their end game? So there's one person who I'm really, really curious to see. I'll tell you after.
Okay. Now I'm like, I want to know.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the dilemma of like, because spoilers don't particularly bother me, but I know how readers feel about them and a lot of readers. And spoilers don't bother me because they reduce my anxiety.
I get that.
There's nothing like when you're reading a story and you're really, developing this affection for these characters, and then, they're just in these horrific, terrible circumstances where
Mhm.
things could just all go wrong, and and I'm so stressed out for them.
Oh, yeah, I get it. I think that is what draws me to romantasy sometimes over strict fantasy is that I can still guarantee because it's romance fantasy that like there's gonna be a happy ending. They're gonna be together. It's gonna be okay.
I mean, I think that there's a plus to that, and also like it was an interesting thing that somebody else said to me recently that a lot of time that they feel that people really argue on social media over the most like they just get really dogmatic about sometimes
Mm.
the craziest things, but like you get into these intense arguments because the world is in chaos and everything is unstable and people are
Mm.
looking for this one thing that anchors them and so if they can fight about the sky being purple they're going to do it all day because they know this truth or whatever whatever it is like and I'm saying that as an example because like it's the crazy things that sometimes people believe but like when they said that to me I thought oh that makes a lot of sense and it's interesting because this is really like, it gets back into your whole storytelling aspect of like layers of perception and truth and trying to balance those out, which, so yeah, I think that when it comes to around to romantasy, it is reassuring for people because in a world of chaos and uncertainty, we
Mm.
have this one thing that we can hold on to, which is, yeah, it can be really reassuring when you're going into a story because you know that somehow things are going to work out. Now, I have to ask you though, if you were dropped into the world of Soulgazer today, what would you find the hardest about being in that world?
Oh, great question. Probably okay, so what I would find hardest would be the specific challenges every island is currently facing, which is so going to this book, I'm writing it in the middle of COVID, like the first draft came during that. And I remember seeing reading this article that was like, it boiled down to what is a society that cannot grieve, that we cannot mourn and grieve together because we were all having to isolate. And so there's a line in this book that says something like, we are a culture that cannot grieve because the dead cannot move on. Um, so I think that would be pretty horrifying to constantly be surrounded by death, by reminders of death, by spirits, or this like, constant presence of the past and of grief that you just cannot let go of because it just doesn't go away. There's no way to bury it. There's no way for them to move on. I would find that incredibly challenging. And then I also, part of the lore of the islands is that the people, like their ancestors, slaughtered the gods bled into the land, and magic erupted from that pouring in. But the only problem is it's still a finite resource and it was taken without consent. It was taken and like they were murdered for it. And so now, 5 generations later, like about 200 years later, you have like the magic is twisting. You have these beautiful plants all over the Isle of Painted Claw, for example, but most of them are poisonous. and you have these calamitous storms that are hitting these other ones, and you have just constant like sickness and blight, and there's just life is becoming unsustainable, which is also inspired by late stage capitalism. But that is that would be the most challenging, I think, is like I've created a world that is incredibly unstable in a similar way to ours. It's just theirs is more caused by magic. So I think the instability would be pretty challenging. And I don't know how to sail. That was the advantage too of having Saoirse as a point of view character, is that she's a fish out of water. She does not know anything. So when I can put her on a boat, I don't have to worry about describing the pulleys and the rigging and the whatever. I can just say I know mast, sail, and railing, and that's pretty much it. And then that's not true for book two because Phelan knows everything. So I've had to learn everything.
I was going to ask what was the hardest thing to research, and
I think
it,
the hardest thing to research has been the Irish language because again, it is a full codex with all its like rules and beautiful sounds and I've already like I thankfully we have an excellent copywriter and I have a lot of help from my editing team on catching certain mistakes I made because like sometimes I was relying on Google Translate 5 years ago and I should have triple checked it. One of those things being, oh gosh, this is like my audiobook narrator is wonderful and she's Irish. Her name's Alana Kirk-Collins, and she caught the pronunciation of Phelan because the spelling with the O, this is something I've been practicing all week, and then I kept flubbing it, and I'm like, okay, I need to I'll go with what I know for now, and I'm gonna correct myself moving forward. But I think it's pronounced Phelan, like with a W sound.
mm,
And if I spelled it with an E instead of an O or an A instead of an O, it would have been Phelan. So I'm like, it's too late to change it. It's fine. I want to respect the language. Um, so that would be the most challenging, is just because it is a living, breathing thing, and it is, again, like the English colonizers tried their best to eradicate it. And so there's still a lot of like shifts and things that are different, tricky. And so, again, doing my best, trying to be as respectful as possible. Mistakes have already been made,
yeah.
and we're working through those.
Well, I mean that. Look, I lived in Ireland for a period of time.
Oh,
And
I didn't know. That's amazing.
yeah, and yeah. And I get things I don't know the language and very well and get things wrong. So yeah, I mean there is such a huge learning curve with languages. So and
Mhm.
some come to you more naturally than others, but like and you hear about it now where you get people who name, they pick out an Irish name. Like I've heard people who actually name their child Siobhan, but
Mhm.
with the correct spelling, but they don't know that that's how you pronounce it, and they actually call their child Siobhan. Like
Mm.
I mean, you hear these stories, and but I also like once upon a time, a long, long time ago, when I was still working in the school system, I did my practicum at what was actually called Belfast Elementary, and there was a certain immigrant population from Ireland, so I had like machines in my class, and like I mean, so there is something from exposure that helps, but a lot of people don't
That
know.
was helpful to go as well and hear the cadence and hear
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah, because it really yeah, there is a whole different rhythm, and there is that great tradition of storytelling, and so I would love to go back actually, but yeah.
Mhm. Oh, we loved it. Like, I would go back in a heartbeat. I want to go, especially in the Ring of Kerry, that area. We did not stay nearly long enough. It was incredible.
But that's, I mean, yeah, you can never get enough time, when you discover
Yeah.
an amazing place. So, but yeah, the sailing actually would, quite throw me off because, I mean, I would say I don't really have sea legs.
No, I faked that until I made it. This is also a very character-driven story, so I kind of lean into that too, where I'm very interested in her perspective, her internal world, how she's interacting with the crew and the people, and yes, the environment, but I'm not the kind of fantasy writer who's going to spend 3 pages describing how a ship works. And like, that's wonderful if you want to read that. It exists. It's just not me.
Yeah, no, I more feel like you it's more about what you need to know for your own confidence as you're writing and not
Yeah,
about
exactly.
including, right? I mean,
Yeah, so I did look up like a little blueprint to be like, okay, or like my copy editor is a saint, and they were like, so I think you've described like she has to go down below deck to get to this place and stuff. Just make sure you change that here, here, and here. And I'm like, thank you so much, because I'm just like, oh, there's probably a cabin here, and his things here, and there's this here. Like, we're doing our best.
you know what? I mean, it's a great excuse to go on like a sailing trip.
That's true. That's true. Maybe that's like a, I don't know, maybe I can just manifest that for book two's release next summer.
You could have a release party on a ship. Wouldn't that be fun?
So fun.
Yeah, as long as it's not rough seas, like as long as it's a good time of
Hmm.
year, right?
True.
So now, when I was reading, because I read your acknowledgments and some of the information that you included at the end of Soulgazer, and I was wondering about this. You originally approached this as a YA story.
Yeah, yeah. I originally wrote and queried it. This is like 2021, 2022. I comped it to Shelby Maher and Serpent and Dove, which is like one of my all-time favorite books in terms of content and pace and all that kind of stuff at the time. Um, I did query it. It got some fulls. It got pretty far and then just didn't make it through. Actually, it was kind of funny. I queried my current agent's mentor before while my agent was her assistant, and she had passed on it. And then did this whole thing. So I did do that. Yeah, that's the origin.
Almost, look, almost every successful novel has a list of rejections behind it. So,
Oh, true.
because there is also that taste factor, but there's also the timing factor. So, but what challenges did you face as you transitioned this over to new adults?
Yeah. Um, let's see. Challenges were that I hadn't read a lot of adult fantasy in particular. Part of that was leading up to that point. I mean, it was a very like white male dominated space, like since, fantasy started. And then especially in the adult spaces, and a lot of women, including like some of my favorite authors, were basically given the option of like, oh, you're gonna be in YA, or you're automatically, there's just like even some that have been published as adult have been shelved as YA. So that was already a challenge. So I do love YA, and I grew up on YA, and that was like I love like kids and teens. I love that like pace that comes with it and the rich emotional experience. And I just had a misconception in my head that if I wrote adult fantasy, it would have to be dry and very world building heavy and like really long, and that just was not my forte. So in 2023 going into 2024, 'cause that's last summer, right? No, hang on.
Last summer was
Late 2022 going into 2023. There we go. Um, I started reading a lot more adult fantasy, including like Naomi Novik was one. I read Madeline Miller's like Song of Achilles, which is more historical and stuff, but like that's still like really beautiful. Since then I've added there's Ava Reed on the list with Juniper and oh gosh, what's it called? Uh Juniper and Thorn, and like several others. Like I've been exploring. I'm like, oh, this is what you can do with that genre. This is really cool. This is what I want to do. So in 2023, I actually went to Germany for a summer to help my friend recover from surgery with her like kids and her dog and stuff. And I took that time, like pulled back on my day job because I was working from home anyways, and just went hardcore with the revision. Like, okay, if I'm trying to take it from YA to adult, that opens up so much space. And it honestly gave them so much breathing room. So to it was daunting to face it and to enter a genre that I had not, or a age category I hadn't really like touched before. But now I had a few blueprints to kind of do it from. So the nice thing was I was able to expand it a lot because it started at 80,000 words, I think, as like a finished YA piece. And this is now 120 or 130,000. That was with my editor. So like with my agent, I added about 15,000 words, and my editor added about like 30 to 40. So quite a lot, but it was really nice because it gave everything breathing room. And this is, even though it has that adventure component and it has those like like battles in the high seas and storms and antics and all these things, there's also a lot of softness and wistfulness that having it be an adult allowed the room for it to thrive, I think. Whereas an adult in YA, I felt the pressure to just like, okay, and next and next and next and next.
Yeah, I love YA, and I think it's
Oh,
a
I still do so much. Like I still like probably I would say 50% of my reading list is still YA.
oh yeah, I mean I still read tons of YA, and I find that maybe it's because of the age. There's that sense of sometimes of more of self-discovery. And
Mm.
but you've brought that element into the story beautifully with Saoirse and with her journey. And so it does make me really curious to see where that's going to go. I was wondering though, she over the course of the book, it's interesting because at first she's very much almost invisible, and she's like trying to keep her eyes shielded, and like you said, she makes herself as small as possible. She's dressed in a costume, right? She's a magpie. At the beginning when we're first seeing her, and yet over the course of this book, of course, as she emerges, she's called everything from Ocean Eyes to Wolf Tamer to Trouble. So she acquires like quite a number of nicknames, and I was wondering, what's your nickname?
Mine. Mine is Magpie in the family, especially. That was kind of I have a thing for magpies clearly right here. There's one right there too. Yeah, that one, I think that's like where I leaned into the magpie and the wolf idea of like the magpie and the wolf duology and the idea of collecting things and stories and people and memories. And like I've always been a collector. And my name is Maggie, so my mama always called me Magpie, and that kind of stuck.
Well, I mean, that's kind of nice. Like, it's funny because like I'm one of those people who doesn't really have nicknames. So,
Hmm.
and nothing has stuck.
Hmm. See, I always wanted a really cool one, and that was like the only one that anyone gave me growing up. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna lean into it now. This is my identity because like no one at school called me that, none of my friends called me that, and I was just like, I want something cool.
Yeah, and well, and it's also though interesting because to me, like a nickname denotes a certain level of almost intimacy. You
Hmm.
tend to get those from the people who are closest to you usually. And so it's interesting to me that, Phelan, I'm going to be questioning how I say his name.
I I'm kind of waiting until my audiobook comes out. Or I can hear a sample of it so I can mimic her pronunciation because the only other one I was able to find was this like really old guy saying it on YouTube and it was really extreme and I'm like, I don't think that's how it's supposed to sound. So I'm just kind of waiting on that. Yeah, the nicknames too. I think part of that effort was again they're almost one of my favorite lines he says in the book, and this comes early on, is let me make a legend of you. And so I think part of their attempts to nickname her and toss little like things at her is to it's almost like they're like adding set dressing. Like, who are you? Are you this today? Are you Ocean Eyes? This like, mystical, like almost sage-like woman that can see the future or something? Or are you wolf tamer? Are you like cheeky? Are you playful? Can you catch my heart? Can you do it? And then like with trouble, that's just like a little thing he just calls her in private, usually, I think. Maybe in public, I don't really know. But I feel like it's almost, and for him, I feel like it's almost to add some distance because the times he actually says her real name, Saoirse, it's those moments of vulnerability. It's almost like when he's using her real name, it's when he's just being himself and he's kind of clocking her, like not keeping her at a distance now, but he's like letting her in.
Yeah, no, it's such an interesting dynamic with the two of them, and I feel like, it's this is the nerd out feature of my personality would say I could go back through this book and like write a paper about the word choices when it comes to those terms and his approach, and what that means in terms of the personal dynamics at that moment. Because like you do start to you pick up on some things as you're going through, but I always find a second read like that you pick up on so
Mhm.
much more, and it's interesting how layered it is, and and her journey is just such an interesting and inspiring one. I mean, she is it's a journey of self-discovery. It's a journey of like finding some degree of self-confidence and
Mhm.
acceptance for who and what she is, but like also breaking out of this patriarchal prison. Was that something that you were really hoping that readers would take away, this idea of break free of all of the restrictions and limitations that have been
Yeah,
put on you throughout your life?
that's the main message I really want people to take because like the biggest theme for this series too is a question of power. And like who holds it, who controls it, what do you do when you have been manipulated where like not only do you distrust your own power, but you are willingly giving it away to other people to give them more. So that's 100% what I would like to be able to take away from is to lean into that self-discovery and to learn to listen to your voice and trust yourself because um again, I address this in the author's note, I've addressed this publicly, but like I grew up in Christianity and like specifically like Southern evangelical Christianity. And that is like highly patriarchal. Purity culture was also like having a massive sweep in the 2000s and early 2010s when I was a teenager. And so there's this idea that your entire worth is wrapped up in purity, whether it is like sexual purity or it is um, so the layers I specifically perceive this, and that was affirmed by the culture around me. Not necessarily my parents were kind of an outlier. They did their best with how we have a really healthy relationship as adults and stuff too, but they they had their own, like colorful past. So they were able to kind of be like, no, y'all can ask us any questions you want, all that kind of stuff. However, the culture, the church, the schools, everything else around me was enforcing that. So purity, your body's a temple. You need to be thin. You need to be presentable. You also, as a woman, and this is like under their definition of womanhood, as a woman, your job is to be pretty, presentable, soft-spoken, like have that, like meek, obedient, very submissive was the word. Like there's literally like this, I remember this one illustration I saw when I was like way too young of like power headship or something. It's called like where it's like you have like God, husband, wife, children. And it's like this is the layers of protection that you can expect if you're this, this, and this. So for me, as a like I was a fat child. I'm a fat woman. Like I'm mid-size, and that's like why I also wrote Saoirse as like as a fat woman as well, because that was something I always struggled with. Because I'm like, oh well, I'm failing because my body's a temple and I'm bigger than they say I should be, and I need to be smaller to attract a spouse. Okay, so that's one mark against me with sexual purity. Like, I'm not going to get too into it. This is a trigger warning for assault, but I have experienced SA and at a very young age. And then again, as a close to adult, I guess no, I was over 18. Um, and so that marks that against me, where I'm not able to be pure within their context. So another reason why I'm failing, another reason why I don't have worth. And then the third is as I got older, I was not attracting a spouse. I didn't have the thing. My whole purpose and the thing I was basing so many of my decisions around, whether it was where to go to college, what to study, what career to pursue, what to dress, was to attract a spouse. And I was failing at that too. Um, so so much of that I did put into Saoirse and allowed her to hold. Specifically with her, it's the context of her father. It's not necessarily the culture at large. It's not hyper misogynistic or patriarchal, but her father very much like I really wanted him to not amplify, what's it called? Symbolize to symbolize some of those values of like you are wrong and this is my protection and my love looks like taking your power away because your power is wrong and your voice is wrong. And if you want me to love you and you want protection, then you need to submit and let me take all this from you. And so it's unfortunately a dynamic that is alive and well, especially in American evangelicalism, and it is something that I really struggle with. Again, not with my own father necessarily, but like with the culture around me, and that is definitely what influenced her. So if there's anything I hope people take away from that, it is absolutely like you're not wrong for having your own special magic, like your power, your voice, your too muchness, because I was also told it's like too much constantly. Um, None of that are marks against you. Like you are a unique, powerful, special, incredible human just on your own. And you don't have to constantly shift and try to shapeshift yourself to fit someone else's ideals or to fit their standards. I just really want if nothing else, because this is what Libba Bray's books did for me, and that's why I hold her as like my favorite author, and she's just incredible, is I want to open the door and ask questions. I'm not trying to like yell at people to be like, you should choose yourself in this, but I want them to maybe read this and be like, how does my partner talk to me? How do I talk to myself? Like, do I do that? Do I pull myself in? Do I hold myself smaller? Like, I just want to have open those questions for people to start exploring and understanding themselves deeper.
No, it's a very powerful message. I'll only say that as a Bible college graduate and former missionary, I wish I'd
Hmm.
had this book 30 years ago. I,
Hmm.
it gently pulls that back and starts to show you you know, it's that mental and spiritual abuse that she's endured and how that affects her self-image and how being able to see herself through somebody else's eyes and it starts to open her up. It's a really powerful story. So I greatly
Thank
appreciated
you.
that message. So
I
just
definitely wrote it for my younger 20 self as well. Like that was kind of the goal too, was like I wish I'd had a book like this to, and I did have some that were similar, but I specifically wrote this for that person that I was.
yeah, well, I think that I would say I would think that a lot of people that it will resonate with them. Um, so just to wrap this up for a fun question, this is actually a question from the back of your book because you have
Okay.
discussion questions back there. So, if you could have one magical item from the world of Soulgazer, which one would it be and why?
Oh my gosh, why is my brain like not allowing me magical items right now? Honestly, I really love, I mean, clearly I love the sea. I think I would have loved to get my hands on those gills they're hunting for that allow you to just like breathe underwater for like however, I think it's supposed to be like 12 hours or, from like dawn to dusk or something. Of course it went wrong in the book, but if it would not go wrong in real life, that would be so much fun because you could just explore so much longer and that would be just the most incredible time.
Well, and you know what? I don't know where you got the idea for those from, but it was like such a neat way to circumvent like lack of technology, right? Because, and because we don't have scuba tanks and whatever in this world, but
Mhm.
you found a way.
It
Really
was,
cool.
I'm pretty sure I just started with like, what do they need to be over here for? They could be hunting fish, right? What are the fish for? Like it was one of those circumstances. Then I was like, well, I think I want to show Phelan's innovation because he is pretty like again trickster. He's like, well, I've heard the story and I want to just establish both the like silliness of him and also the ways he does come through and then the ways it sometimes goes wrong. And so that was kind of like where I wrapped in those gills. And I'm like, oh, well, they do multiple times in the book need to go underwater without like without air tanks and like need to search for stuff and they need to be able to breathe. And so I was like, well, this works great.
Those are a fantastic idea. So, well, thank you so much for chatting today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a lovely experience.
Well, I wish you all the best with Soulgazer's release, and I really hope that people discover your story and your message, and that they, you know, relate to the characters and enjoy them as much as I did.
Well, thank you. I'm really hopeful too. I'm, I don't know. I'm nervous and excited, and I hope that it finds the right people. And so far, it has. It's found some really wonderful people. So I hope it continues to resonate as well.
I hope so too.